Thank you for tuning in to Ready or Not. We resume the discussion from our previous episode.
So can we do kind of a left and then a right turn here? Would love for you to go through the quick history. I know you've done this before, but no, it's
not quick.
No, it will be.
You cut me off.
The UR486 thing.
Oh, okay. RU486.
Or RU486.
Yeah.
But then let's tie that into now the whole gender identity confusion fiasco.
Yeah. So as of 2023, now 2024, the annual abortion rate for medication abortion is like 55%. So over half of the babies being aborted in America right now are no longer, their mothers are no longer going to brick and mortar abortion centers. It's not suction catheter tube. It's not DNC, DNE. It's like a pill. It's a 2-regimen pill. The first one's mifepristone or mifeprex, and it cuts off the hormone progesterone, without which the lining of the uterus breaks down and the baby starves to death. And then a couple of days later, you take misoprostol, forces your uterus to have contractions, and you expel your child in the toilet. And abortion clinics or online sellers actually tell you to have the abortion at home. Like, you don't go anywhere. You sit on the toilet, and they say, don't look and flush. So yes, if you're listening to this, actually, you should be concerned about the water you're drinking. You should consider, I know this sounds like super Alex Jonesy and conspiracy theory, but like, you actually should consider reverse osmosis. Because just thousands of babies being flushed down toilets, and it's pretty sick to think about.
Yep.
And so that regimen or pill is called RU486. You've heard the phrase medication abortion. It's the same thing. So RU486 refers to the French pharmaceutical company that created the abortion pill, Roussel-Uclaf, RU. Roussel-Uclaf has a majority shareholder named Hoechst AG, HOECSHT or something, SCHT. Hoechst AG, this German company, was the co-founder of IG Farben or IG Farben. And for the history buffs who have been at Holocaust museums, you might recognize that name because IG Farben created the cyanide gas known as Zyklon B. Zyklon B being the gas used to poison Jews in Nazi death camps. I mean, so if you go to the Holocaust Museum in D.C., in Washington, D.C., you will see some of the containers that they have there, and they say IG Farben, or they say Zyklon B, or both. So once again, Roussel-Uclaf, French pharmaceutical company that invents the abortion pill, their majority shareholder, Hoechst AG. Hoechst AG, the co-founder of IG Farben. IG Farben, the creator of Zyklon B. So Hoechst AG simply shifted from creating poison to murder Jews to creating poison to murder babies. It's actually the same company. So it's like, yeah, not only are we dealing with the same ideology sometimes, eugenics, humanism, secularism, neo-Malthusianism, Darwinism, but sometimes we're actually dealing with the same people, the same institutions, because we did not utterly tear down every high place.
That's right. Now, hopefully people are waking up, even right now as you're listening to this, wait, there's not kind of a connection. I think the first person, if you remember the Ray Comfort, he made kind of a connection between the Holocaust and abortion and things. And then you've done a fantastic job.
They both said they weren't persons. I mean, the Hiesgericht, the German Supreme Court, said that the Jew was not a person. Dred Scott v. Sanford said that the black man was not a person. Guess what? Roe v. Wade, 1973, it says the term person as used in the Constitution does not include the unborn. So the prequel, or rather the prerequisite to every genocide is the denial of the personhood status of your victims. They're not really persons. They're not really one of us. So it's the same arguments, the same ideology, you hear me say things like that, like you were just saying, basically, Pastor David, and people are like, what the, it's kind of like that. This is like Hitlerian, either Seth is a weirdo. And should be put out to pasture, and there's no way that's true, or I've been living a lie my whole life. Yep. And that's why actually my messages and presentations are pretty traumatic, Pastor David, and I know this because people come up to me after church and say, I've had responses like, I don't know what to do with my life now.
Yep.
I've had responses like, I feel like I've been living a lie. I've had people walk up to me in tears saying, I never knew. I have people walk up to me in tears saying, how did I never know any of this? Bro, at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills with Jack earlier this month, with Pastor Jack Hibbs, were happening now. I asked the congregation on a whim. It just occurred to me. I said, by raise of hands, how many people know what Buck versus Bell is? It's like 2,000 people in the room.
Very few.
4 or 5. And I realized, I was like, this is probably one of the most informed congregations in America. And I had like 4 or 5 hands in a group of 2,000. And that's one example of what I mean about the hidden history of the secular moral revolution. It's so integrated in evil, and like we've been lied to. It's been hidden from us. So when you learn how integrated that the spirit of the age has been with the people he's been demonically inspiring, and how these people architected this culture of death, it's like, I don't know how else to put it. It's like, I've been living a lie. Like, it's almost like a different reality. And that's why, like, it's hard for me to do fellowship and develop deep friendships with people who aren't in the fight. Sure. Because we might even have Christ in common, bro. But it's like, you have no idea what my life's like. You have no idea what's happening. You're not awake. You have no idea what's happening in this world, and it actually makes fellowship difficult because it's like they are living in a different reality.
Absolutely.
And so, what was Buck versus Bell? I mean, I think it's probably worth talking about, given that 5 people at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills, one of my favorite churches, 5 hands in a crowd of 2,000. Dude, it's right up there with Dred Scott v. Sanford. It's one of the worst, most atrocious Supreme Court decisions in American history.
So explain it real quick.
1924, the state of Virginia mandates the sterilization of those considered a threat to the gene pool. 3 years later, it goes to the Supreme Court. In the case Buck versus Bell, is a woman named Carrie Buck, and she had mental disabilities, and so they wanted to sterilize her so she couldn't have kids. So Buck versus Bell, 8-1 decision, upholds Virginia's mandated sterilization law. And Oliver Wendell Holmes, Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, a political progressive and eugenicist, who authored Buck versus Bell, said in the decision, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Within 15 years, it's estimated that over 70,000 people were forcibly sterilized between California and New York. Our country, the land of the free and the home of the brave, forcibly sterilized. You know what if you're listening to this, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm talking snip, snip, or tie your tubes.
Yeah, against their will.
You don't get to have kids against their will. Over 70,000 people forcibly sterilized because they were considered unfit to reproduce. You know who celebrated that decision? When Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, celebrated that decision when it was decided.
Oh, it was right in line with everything she did.
Guess what the Nazis quoted at the Nuremberg trials in their defense? Buck versus Bell. You sterilized tens of thousands of... The Nazis, guys, cited our Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell, in their defense at the Nuremberg trials.
They just took that decision and applied it to their view of what fit meant.
Yep.
And felt justified.
And the reason why this is all connected with everything else we've been talking about, for the people listening going, that sounds like a tangent. It's not. Margaret Sanger and her American Birth Control League, later renamed Planned Parenthood in 1942, wasn't just part of the eugenics movement, they were the eugenics movement. So you have to understand the history of abortion. Abortion is not just like, well, we want women to be able to decide if they had too many kids and be able to plan their parenthood. No, like actually the entire operation of Planned Parenthood started with wanting to control populations of those who were like unfit.
Sure.
And encouraging lots of procreation for those considered fit. Who does that refer to? Well, that's the thing about eugenics and humanism. It's very subjective. The elite class kind of get to decide whatever arbitrary characteristics that they think are needed to be fit. But here are some of them. Epileptics, alcoholics, people with a criminal record, mental or physical disabilities, so like a missing limb maybe, or maybe you have Down syndrome or something like this. These were the kind of people that Margaret Sanger did not want to have children. Here's a quote that'll rip your face off, Pastor David. Margaret Sanger once said, enforce a stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is tainted, or whose inheritance is already such that objectionable traits may be transmitted to offspring. Yes, you just heard a quote from the founder of Planned Parenthood, folks, saying, enforce a stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation.
Yep.
Margaret Sanger has other quotes where she talks about like actually setting up like basically like concentration camps and segregating like epileptics and mentally disabled and actually putting them in concentration camps to separate them from the rest of the society. That's the founder of Planned Parenthood. So you just need to understand, like, Planned Parenthood was like, oh, let women decide if they want to have more or less kids. It was actually an intentional campaign to eliminate those that she defined as unfit to reproduce.
Sure.
So it started with birth control, it ended with abortion, but it was all the same agenda. It was all part of the same movement. I mean, she even said, birth control is not contraception thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. It means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks. You know, those human weeds that threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization.
Well, if you're pro-evolution, you have to embrace her.
Evolution and Darwinism not just naturally flows, it necessarily flows into eugenics.
No, you don't get to not embrace Margaret Sanger and everything we've talked about and embrace evolution. You can't.
And one of her friends who wrote in her magazine, a certain Leon Whitney, he wrote an article in her birth control review. It was her magazines where she and her ilk would publish their ideas, but she was the editor-in-chief of the birth control review. It was a Planned Parenthood magazine. This guy named Leon Whitney wrote a piece for her called Selective Sterilization and Urgent Need. Selective sterilization, because only the unfit should be sterilized, and urgent need. And Leon Whitney once said this: while we were pussyfooting around, the Germans were calling a spade a spade. So he was actually mourning the fact that, like, they weren't moving quickly enough in the application of their Darwinist views in America. He
was bummed that Hitler was doing a better job than they were. The Germans were calling
a spade.
Yeah. So they actually...
And so not only did Darwinism, does it necessarily flow into eugenics, it actually did within the same family, which is actually a very interesting piece of history. Yeah. So Charles Darwin, right, Origin of Species, okay, might makes right, survival of the fittest. Yep. And so you came from monkeys as an animal kingdom, so there's no sanctity of life, there's no God. And so the strong will survive and the weak will die. Even if the strong have to kill the weak in order to survive. Isn't that what makes the animal kingdom the animal kingdom? The strong have to kill the weak in order to survive. They got to feed. Charles Darwin has a cousin named Francis Galton. Francis Galton coined the term eugenics. So we actually went from Darwinism to eugenics in the same family, bro.
There you go.
His cousin, Francis Galton, and guess what? Galton credits The Origin of Species as the book that turned him into the eugenicist that he would be. And he's considered the modern father of the eugenics movement. So, like, apple didn't fall far from the tree. Interestingly enough, Francis Galton then ends up mentoring Havelock Ellis, the Alfred Kinsey of England, a real sexual weirdo. Like, the dude hosted orgies in his home.
Yes.
Real weirdo. He wrote a book called Studies on the Psychology of Sex. I don't recommend reading it. Anyways,
is this the gentleman
Havelock
that was
Ellis
also
ends
a
up
pedophile?
no. Havelock Ellis becomes Margaret Sanger's #1 political and sexual influence. So when Sanger is facing arrest in New York for breaking obscenity laws by sending pornographic kind of birth control literature in the mail in 1914 with her magazine Woman Rebel. By the way, the tagline of her Woman Rebel magazine was "No gods and no masters." And so rather than get arrested, she ships her 2 kids off to be raised by someone else. She has her socialist friends in the New York labor movement forge her a passport, and she flees to England. While in England, she meets Havelock Ellis. She sleeps her way up the levers of power. So she was the first Kamala Harris. So H.G. Wells, like all these people, like George Bernard Shaw, like Sanger's just sleeping with all these people, having sex with all these people. And she begins a very tempestuous, crazy affair with Havelock Ellis. She's married. Like, she's got kids and a husband back in New York, right? Havelock Ellis then writes about his sexual experiences with Margaret Sanger in letters that he forces his wife to read and drives her insane. And so Sanger and Havelock Ellis drive Mrs. Ellis insane. And I've been reading one of Sanger's books called My Fight for Birth Control from 1932. I have the first edition. And the way she writes about Havelock Ellis, I mean, she credits him as like her number one influence.
Wow.
So anyways, my point is this. We went awfully quickly from Darwinism to Galton to Havelock Ellis to Sanger. Let me put that in a different way. We went awfully quickly from the premise man is an animal to kill the unfit to sexual chaos to child sacrifice.
Yep. There's no, but that
and
is
the reason is because ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims.
And you have, I mean, that is the only road to go down. Once you start moving along that thought pattern, they only lead in one direction. You're never going to accidentally.
Yeah, well, is it Proverbs 3 or Proverbs 5 that says, those who hate God love death?
Yep. And there's so much truth to that. And it's so crazy to me. You read things in the Proverbs where you're like, oh, come on. Who says, come lie with us? We're going to spread the net and shed innocent blood. You're like, that's so weird. Who's going to shed innocent blood? Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
People lie in wait and they pounce at the opportunity to take the life of the unborn all the time, even still.
That's right.
And we're seeing, you brought up, the elites dictating and rewording. Even, gosh, I think I was 20, 21. Doesn't Planned Parenthood sound like a brilliant phrase? Yeah, you're going to help me plan my parenthood. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
I was very naive.
They're
even at
very
20.
effective linguists.
Right. At 20 years old, I thought they were there to help people. It wasn't until someone was like, hey, that's not a good place.
Yeah.
And so being very careful, even if today you're listening to this and you're waking up to things that you thought, you said people are realizing they've been living in a lie.
Yep.
Well, doesn't that mean it's your lie? You were living in what you were told. There's a moment of mercy from the Lord, but as God gives you understanding, you're now responsible for that understanding.
Yeah.
You have to now deal with the truth in which God has given you and respond appropriately. Earlier today, you shared a quote from someone about a reckless car going into a crowd.
Yeah, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was really wrestling on how to almost justify his plan to try to murder Hitler, to try to kill Hitler. And he writes in his writings about how like he saw Hitler as kind of like a drunk man driving a bus into a group of innocent bystanders and children. And he has a sniper rifle or a gun, and he can take out the driver of the bus and save all the people. Does he shoot? Like this was how he was starting to see the scenario actually in Nazi Germany, which I think is an apt analogy, by the way.
No doubt.
And so he has this line. He says, if I sit next to a madman as he drives a car into a group of innocent bystanders, I can't, as a Christian, simply wait for the catastrophe to happen, then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver. So to quote my pastor, Rob McCoy, what we generally do in America is we wait downstream to pick up human heartache that we helped create. That's what he's saying. He said, you can wait for the human heartache and loss of life, and then you can comfort the wounded that survived and help bury their dead.
And you'll even feel good about it.
All that is waiting downstream to pick up human heartache that could have been prevented had you been engaged in the business of the public square beforehand.
And that's where we are now.
Yeah.
We're looking not only with the issue of the unborn child, but now we're meddling with the minds and innocence of born children. This whole gender identity and false affirmation or affirming the lie is really what we're affirming. You're not affirming gender, you're affirming the lie, and you're affirming their confusion and fear.
Yeah.
And so let's speak for a moment before we wrap this up about that whole thing. Earlier you started off saying these are all woven together and tied together. How so?
Yeah. So Gnosticism, the old Christian Gnostics that like Paul and other church fathers had to preach against, actually, had this belief that the physical world was created by some evil demigod and it couldn't be trusted. So the physical world as we know it is fallen and unreliable. So your flesh, your cravings, all of these things, super suspect and sketch and shouldn't be trusted. And to some degree, that there's some truth to that, of course. But they had a disregard for the physical, which like obviously Christ didn't because he came with flesh. Yeah. And when he rose with flesh, and he actually still had the holes in his hands. You know what I mean? So, but Gnosticism or Gnostic dualism views a duality between the body and the self, or the soul and a vessel. This goes, I mean, you can go back to like, unfortunately, like Aristotle and others who, said things like the soul in the body is like a man that drives a chariot. So like your soul is the real you. Your body is like a chariot that the real you navigates.
Sure.
Meaning that like your body is not you. So what's crazy, and like I can always prove how like theological the culture war is, because the other side uses religious lingo to try to explain their paganism.
Yes.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it's
because they
wild.
can't help, because eternity is written on the heart of man. Actually,
Amen.
that's the answer
Yep.
to why they do that. They can't help but do it. So there is this transgender documentary that this big trans activist was fundraising for on Kickstarter a few years ago. The title of the documentary was "I Am Not My Body." So they're using the language of Gnosticism and Gnostics, not
wild.
me.
Yep.
They use it to describe their own worldview. Okay. There was this viral transgender video on a BBC social YouTube account. And the trans person, because I actually can't remember if it was a man or a woman, the gender confused person on the video talked about the body as a meat skeleton. So like your body, like right here, like I just shake your hand. They say called meat skeleton, right? Because they don't see it as the real person. You see, like they use this language, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So Gnostic dualism says, I am not my body. It says that the real me is self-awareness, consciousness, desires. What transgender movement tries to do is they're trying to talk about the soul, but they don't have the language. They don't have the language to talk about it.
Sure.
So when they say like the real me, or when they say gender identity, you know what they're trying to talk? They're trying to talk about the soul, actually, because it is actually true that people can have different gender. I don't like this idea of a gender spectrum because it's not true. You're either male or female. But what I mean is there is a spectrum of gender expression.
Sure.
An effeminate male.
Yeah.
You ever met a more effeminate dude? Like,
Yeah.
so there are spectrums for this stuff.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you're like now a woman. Like, you're either a man or a woman. But I'm saying like there are different gender expressions, but and that's not your body. That's like your soul. Right. It's the intangible person we
Yep.
can't see. But like C.S. Lewis wrote about this beautifully, like we're both body and soul. But like the parallelism in the Hebrew scriptures actually testifies to the true nature of who we are as well. I know this is getting super metaphysical for the listeners, but I'll make it really simple again in a second. It's actually really important, right? When I refuse to repent of my sin, my bones wasted away. So when I refuse to repent of my sins, a metaphysical act, my bones, a physical thing, started hurting and aching.
Well, there you go.
This is the parallelism. Yep. And by the way, you'll find this throughout the Proverbs. It's not, that's just one example. So what is it testifying to? That you are both body and soul. That those two things are so united and intertwined that when you refuse to do a metaphysical thing, it affected you physically.
Yeah.
So we are both body and soul. This is the orthodox teaching of the church. And so Gnostic dualism, y'all, was labeled a heresy centuries ago. It's like the most regressive thing you can think of. There's nothing progressive about secular progressivism. None of it. It's all just a hearkening back. It's a renaissance to old pagan, kooky, old ideas. Okay, so how does this then get applied? Let's simplify it. If I am not my body, and this physical thing is just a shell for the real me, then, well, why not take your vessel to the body shop and give it a makeover to make the outside feel more like the inside? If your body's like a Corvette that you, the soul, step into to navigate however you want, why not take your Corvette to the body shop and give it a makeover? Now we're at the precipice of transgenderism, right? Why not mutilate this thing as much as you want? Because it's not the real you anyways.
Sure.
It's like, well, but that's not true. And we're seeing the high suicide rate in the transgender community, which they attribute to our refusal to affirm them, which is like, I don't know how they've gotten even would-be conservatives to accept that talking point. We know it's because they're harming themselves. They're pursuing a fantasy.
Yeah. Think of
and it's affecting them metaphysically and spiritually.
Think of this, the route of depression you are on. You're already confused, which that alone right there is, you have to have enough compassion on to hurt for somebody. Like, man, what is it like to wake up every day not knowing if you're in the right body? Oh my gosh. And then that's what you were taught as a first or second grader.
Yeah.
It's infused into kids did not come up with this.
Yeah, that's right.
It was told to them. They
Yeah.
were messed with. They were molested in their mind.
Yeah.
But so they grow up in this strange confusion, feeling out of place, then probably try to identify with the opposite version of whatever they are, but that's not working. And so there's still this weird isolation, hollow desperation in their own heart and mind. So then some go so far as to mutilate their body, trying to just make the isolation and desperate attempt to normalize go away.
Yeah.
And even the mutilation of your body didn't work. Of course you're suicidal.
Yeah, that's
There's
right.
nothing left to try.
Yeah, that's right.
There's nothing left to try.
Yeah.
And if you're listening today and you're anywhere on that path or know someone, look, the only hope is Christ.
Yeah, that's right.
He does absolute miracles. You are a new creation. The moment you come into Christ, you want to talk about becoming a new creation. That's what we all need.
Yeah,
Whether
yeah.
you're man or woman or lost somewhere in the middle, you
Amen.
need Jesus, right? We
Yeah.
all are lost and desperate.
That's right.
And so the moment you find your identity, not even in yourself, because that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I remember pre-Jesus David.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was not a good guy. My mind was completely destroyed.
Yep.
And so all of us, man, woman, or you're not sure, need to put on Christ. And anyone listening who's unsure, who's lost, who's seeking, look, before you go any further, can we at least talk?
Yeah.
Give us a call. Call a church around you that believes in the Bible.
Yeah.
Give us a call. But let's talk, because
Yeah.
there is hope. I love what Peter said, a living hope.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
a temporary hope that worked while you were on vacation, but then you came back to Crazyville. Like actual living hope that lands every day anew and afresh in your heart and your mind.
Yeah. Amen.
And so all of this stuff, whether you're contemplating abortion, please don't. There are so many other avenues, people who will help you, support you, mentor you.
Adopt your baby.
Adoption is a beautiful... Our friend Nathan Held, he's one of the associate pastors here. He drums. They have 5 kids, none of them biological. I mean, they're the coolest family in the world. His wife's white, he's black. Their kids are everything in the middle.
Yeah.
And they just come tumbling into the room. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Amen. Yeah.
Whether it's identity, depression, whatever, there's absolutely answers.
Yep.
And they've been the same answers the whole time. They're out of the throne room of God. They're eternal, which is awesome
right.
because it means they don't expire.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that worked for another no, it will forever work.
That's right.
And look, if people want to continue to learn and grow from all of the great information resources that you're putting out all the time, how do they find you? How do they go along for
Thank
this?
You, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you go to the whiterose.life. You've also social media as well, or on Instagram and Facebook. My podcast is Unaborted with Seth Gruber, although we're about to rebrand to the Seth Gruber Show, so you might see it called that. And we do about 2 episodes a week, and we cover a whole range of topics, but it's the culture of death. We're exposing evil, awakening the church to our duty and obligation to tear down all the high places.
It
And
is
so
a time.
go to the whiterose.life, and we'll have a new website being launched soon as well. But if you guys join at $35 a month, you get a activism resistance box welcoming you that gets sent to you. And then we have this digital resistance platform hosted on this platform called Circle. And that's where we have like our pro-life courses and curriculum and quizzes. We have a pro-life masterclass coming out in like February or March with people like Kirk Cameron, Jack Hibbs, John Amanchukwu, Melissa Oden, the abortion survivor, Anthony Levantino, the former abortionist, and other really great resources. And then $70 a month, you get our book club, and we read a book together once a month and talk through it. And we have a lot more resources coming out with our film, The 1916 Project, which is going to be a game changer in the culture space and in the fight for
And
life.
you're thinking May-ish, maybe?
Yeah, and then my first book, The 1916 Project, will probably come out like beginning of June.
Okay.
We'll do a nationwide screening, if you're interested,
sign us
of
up.
The 1916 Project in big churches around America, June through August, June, July, August. For 3 months, basically, I'll be taking my film on tour.
Okay.
But you can't watch it live stream. You actually have to be in person.
Sure.
Provide more firepower behind the film and the marketing distribution strategy with a September goal of like Amazon Prime or like,
Oh,
or,
yeah.
or somewhere where anyone can watch it online.
Neat.
So we're really being intentional. We're moving slower than I like to move. I like to move much faster, but it's just because we want to make sure this thing goes uber viral and actually really changes and awakens millions of Christians
It'll happen.
in
There's
the
no
White
doubt.
Rose Resistance. So that's what we're doing. TheWhiteRose.life, www.thewhiterose.life. And then you can subscribe to my podcast, Unaborted, give us 5 stars, help us reach more people. But Pastor David, you're a warrior, bro.
Yeah, I got to tell
Appreciate
you,
you.
as we wrap this up, it is so good to just be with like-minded, passionate, committed
Amen.
people. And
Amen.
it's been a blast
Likewise.
to watch you do what God's called you to do
Thank
and to
you.
do it together
Thank
a little
you for
bit.
linking arms with me. Amen. We
Oh,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
All the way.
Amen.
As we're signing off, any last words you want to say to the world?
If you don't like the conclusions of your worldview, don't blame your political opponents. Blame your worldview and be baptized.
There you go. Man, so appreciate your time, your heart, your commitment, the wit and sarcasm. Look, the moment we stop laughing, right, it's over. You got to keep living life.
yeah.
But, man, God
Thanks,
bless you and
brother.
all you do. Absolutely.
Godspeed.
See you guys.